What's happening with religion in America? The Pew Research Foundation, which very often comes out with research done in the United States about religious trends, attitudes, and affiliations, has just released a major study that talks about the religious affiliation of the American population. And what it is showing is that there are an increasing number of Americans who are not affiliated with religion, and this number has increased. If you look at it on a pie chart, you'd probably see that about this much of that pie chart would be taken up with a group of people that some have called the nuns. And what the study is showing is that this has increased from a year or two ago when they did a similar study. And if trends continue, it's going to continue to increase where a larger and larger share of the American population are not affiliated with a religion. The only major branch of American Christianity that has kind of held its own and is larger than this particular segment is Protestant evangelical Christianity, but all others declined. It's an interesting matter to look at and to understand. Statistics are boring. Statistics don't always tell every part of the story, but at least they're seeing a trend here, and it raises something that each of us should really stop to think about. It said in this particular survey that roughly 7 in 10 Americans identified with some branch of Christianity, but that's down from almost 8 in 10 when this survey was last taken a few years ago. And what we're looking at is really the trend that is developing as a result of a continuing onslaught against faith, against belief in God, in the Bible, in religion in general, for any number of reasons. As we look around the scene that is taking place today, we look and we see a continual onslaught. Belief is challenged. New finds, new discoveries in science, even advances in science tend to take one's mind away from God, creation, the idea of a creator and God's hand in human life. And it's an ongoing trend. The truth of the Bible, the validity of the Bible, continually challenged at every turn in many different circles today. And with, again, the fast pace of life, the very modern global society that we have, people are becoming less religious and less inclined to believe in something absolute and remarkable in that way. The moral climate has changed dramatically, especially in the United States. We see those matters dealt with, same-sex marriage, the attitudes that have begun to shift, accepting same-sex marriage as an option, a legitimate option within the American population. The Supreme Court has even now considered a case that would determine the constitutionality of same-sex marriage for the United States of America. So a lot is taking place that erodes belief, religion, belief in God, belief in the Bible. This particular survey found that the drop in Christian affiliation held for all age groups as well, but especially among young adults. And that perhaps is very troubling. I work with young adults. I teach young adults who do want to understand and learn about the Bible. And I understand the challenges that they have in many different ways, living godly, living a good life in the midst of a culture and a society that is geared towards stripping away morality. And so to see that this is even beginning to make inroads there, I'm not naive to think that even among people that I work with as part of my church affiliation are not being affected and impacted by this. It's a very serious situation, one that all of us who do believe need to take seriously and understand as to what is taking place around us. What we're seeing is a growing apathy among people of faith, even at times, as whatever causes them to become apathetic, to let down in their own life, that can then lead to perhaps agnosticism or even outright atheism. I think every one of us need to guard against that and to understand what is happening in our world, in our culture today. There's a couple of scriptures that I have to think about in regard to this. One is in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 12. Christ's Olivet prophecy, where he makes it a comment about the times that we're living in. He says, because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. Iniquity, sin, lawlessness, it grows, it develops, and it leads to an ever-increasing percentage of Americans who don't believe, have no religious affiliation. It can affect you. It can affect me if we allow that. But it is a trend of this world and our culture. In many ways, our world does not want to retain God in its knowledge. That's the situation that the Apostle Paul addressed in the first chapter of Romans, where he talked about this in verse 21. He says, because they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. If we don't work to retain God in our thoughts, in our heart, then our thoughts can become empty and lead to futility. That's what is reflected in this particular dynamic here. A growing percentage of people who are growing futile in their thoughts about God, about belief, and about faith. It is something to understand and to pray about, but certainly to be on guard against in our own life. We'll be talking more about this in future BT Dailies. For now, that's BT Daily. Join us next time.